So like I said, I'm an artist. I've been doing landscape painting for the last 5 years. I've been a painter for like many years before that, but in the last 5 years, I've been really working on not only making my art, but marketing it. And my work at MoMA has given me a lot of great kind of inside knowledge about what it's like to, be marketing in like a larger scale. So I've been using a lot of the tips and tricks I've learned from working at MoMA, other things I've learned about, how to market as an artist, and kind of combine that as I go. So I love talking about these kinds of things. So I wanted to kind of share it all with you to hopefully inspire some of you. And if any of you have interesting tips and tricks yourself, I would love to hear it. I'm just one artist. This is like my own like interests and skills and things like that. So I'll be talking a little bit about myself. Let's see here. Oops, hold on one second. I'll be talking a little bit about myself, finding a connection with an audience, pricing, customer service, social media, the website, blog, email ecosystem, and virtual events. So just as there's no right or wrong way to make art, there's no right or wrong way to engage your audience. I think it's really important to market your work in a way that makes sense and feels comfortable for you. The following is my personal journey. So if there's anything that I'm talking about that doesn't resonate for you, I wouldn't give it a second thought. This is all about kind of inspiring folks. And we all have different goals. We all have different ways we like to approach these things. But I do think that there's hopefully going to be some common threads and sort of a universal way to communicate that I think should resonate, regardless of, where you're at with your art making. So a little bit about me. I'm from upstate New York, Saratoga Springs area. I graduated from Pratt Institute with a major in painting. And I've worked at the Museum of Modern Art for the last 15 years. I am doing, let's see here, the slide skips. So I've been a musician, a cartoonist, and a painter. I've painted in many different styles, as you can see here. And here's a few of my current paintings. I've been doing landscape painting for the last 5 years. And I've been really working on trying to get as many paintings as I can into people's homes and to connect with people as much as possible. And I've been able to sell about 130 paintings in the last 5 years, with a lot of those paintings having been sold just in the last couple of years. So if the slides will permit me to keep moving, here we go. So my goal in making art is to use art to connect people to the healing powers of nature. I think I want to start this conversation about my goal, because I think goals are so incredibly important. I think it's so important to have a goal, be focused with it, don't forget about it, and then really celebrate when you reach it. And I think it's really important to make manageable, achievable goals. I know so many times with different artistic projects I've made where I've made these really huge goals, or there's been like a sense of mission creep where I kind of keep adding more and more sort of expectations on a given project. But instead, if I say, no, this is what it's going to be totally manageable, then I think that really helps build confidence. And it's just sort of like with everything else in life, I think, things grow incrementally. So I think it's really great to have that goal, reach it, and then, set the goal a little bit higher next time. In terms of how I make art, I know that in the past, and I know a lot of artists really hang their hat on how they make their art. So what medium they're using, what style, what subject matter. I've often picked these things like kind of arbitrarily and then like so committed to them, even though they don't necessarily make an amazing connection with an audience. So these days I've been really much more focused on why I make art. So for me personally, the fact I use oil paint, the fact I do landscapes, that in itself is not significant to me. I think what's really significant and powerful to me is my ability to actually connect with people with my art, to be able to elicit an emotional connection. That to me is the magic. So I try to be really flexible on how I do it. So in that way I can remove any barriers that exist between me and the viewer so that I can kind of fulfill my why. So I'm going to take a few slides to kind of talk about this idea a little bit more. So when I first started trying to connect people to the healing power of nature, I made these big 30 by 40 inch photorealistic paintings. They're kind of like photo collage style paintings. I took like over a year to make these. Like some of them in this series like took several months. And it wasn't for like a full year before I actually started to see if people were connecting with the work. It turns out they weren't really. I enjoyed them. I thought they were great, but there was something kind of getting in the way. And I thought, gosh, it's going to take me a lot longer to kind of keep up with this style before like I find a way to connect with folks. So I did what they call in the business world a pivot. So I took a look at this painting that I made just with extra paint, from one of those paintings, and I just kind of dashed it off this impressionistic landscape. And I posted it online just sort of absentmindedly, and it got 10 times the amount of engagement that any of the other paintings I did got. And I was like, wow, that's kind of wild. And then like about a week after, I posted this picture of my palette, just some random paint on my palette, and it got even more engagement. And I was like, what is going on? At this point, it's just insulting, right? Like all my skills are for nothing. People just like these blobs of paint. And so, I didn't get discouraged. I got curious, which is a recurring theme of my talk, where I looked at that impressionistic landscape painting. I looked at this accidental painting I made in my palette. And I realized that I like these just as much as the photorealistic paintings I made, but they took a fraction of the amount of time to make, obviously, as the photorealistic paintings. And it serves my why. It serves like why, like it, I think it is like a form of art that's connecting people to nature, and it is making an impact. So I wanted to see if maybe I could pivot with this a little bit. Like if I kept making these impressionistic landscape paintings, would people connect to it and feel like a connection to nature? So I quit doing those paintings, and this was the first one I tried, and I posted it online. I wanted it to be for sort of a general audience. This is perhaps much easier for me than for a lot of artists whose audience may not be just their friends and family on Facebook, right? It's like a more select group. But nonetheless, I think it's really important when you're trying to connect to people over your goal is to, find that audience and try to find a way to connect with them. So I showed them this work. People loved it. I made a few more paintings in this style, and people just kind of kept connecting with them. Let's see, here's another one. And as I went along, I intentionally did not make a website. I didn't make email or a blog or business cards or any of those things. I really wanted to stick to this idea of my goal and really be super focused on that and super focused on making sure that people were like relating to my art and that there was like a real dialogue going on, so that I wasn't just an artist who was just sort of yelling into the void, hoping that someone else might come, and hear me. So what happened after I kept making these is people really loved them and came to me and said, oh, could we buy one? And it was only until after someone asked me that did I put it on Etsy. And Etsy is really super easy place to put your art for sale. And again, I didn't want to be distracted by all of the other levels of marketing. And my idea here was that the more I focus on making what I call irresistible paintings or irresistible artwork, in other words, that connects with people, whatever subject matter you may use, I think there's a way to connect with people, whether it's a really challenging topic or really broad, such as landscape painting. And I figured that if I can do that, then all the other marketing tips and techniques and tricks, only then will they really be effective. So if people aren't interested in what I'm offering to begin with, I don't see why the marketing techniques would really work. So I stayed really focused on this idea about really connecting with folks. People started to ask if they could do, if I would do commissions, which I hadn't really thought of. I didn't think maybe I'd even be especially interested. But when people asked that, I realized they're saying, hey, I get what you're doing. And I too want to use your art to connect to nature. And if you were able to paint this scene, that would mean so much to me. And I thought, oh gosh, here, like they're showing me the way. And by doing commissions, this could be a fantastic way for me to really reinforce that connection. So the 4 images you see here are all commissions that I've done. And just following in this theme of really zeroing in on how to stay engaged and to connect with people, I would do essentially A/B testing, or you go to the eye doctor and they say, which one's better, A or B? So on the left, I might post this picture, this impressionistic landscape of a mountain. And then the next week I might I might post this more abstract painting of a mountain and see which one got more engagement. As it turned out, the one on the left did. So then that told me, well, you should either not paint abstractly or, and this is what turned out to be true, I actually wanted to keep trying this more abstract style, but I knew not to paint like this. This wasn't quite working. So I kept experimenting with different ways. I didn't get discouraged. I got curious. So I kept trying different ways to paint. And the two paintings you see here are examples of kind of the current evolution of my more abstract landscape painting. And these works are getting the amount of engagement and sales that my kind of other more impressionistic paintings are getting. And I just think it's such a like kind of cool idea where I was trying to be humble and really listen to what people were telling me. And once again, they're kind of directing me towards these bigger brush strokes, being messier, very similar to that palette, that accidental painting I made in the palette that I showed you a few slides ago. And I could tell that my audience is constantly redirecting me away from sort of my more obsessive kind of, hyper detailed perfectionistic painting. And that painting like this is actually more healing for me, honestly. And it's more fun and it feels really good and it celebrates oil paint in the way that I really enjoy it as well too. And so I think there's so much potential to be had for, at least for me, to listen to my audience a lot and really get super curious as to what people are interested in connecting with. So I think there's basically three ways to kind of get a stranger to engage with my art and to purchase the work. The first step I just talked about a lot, which is, I worked really aggressively, especially for the first few years. I continue to, but especially the first few years, to kind of make work that people find irresistible, something that really, really connects. There's no obstacles for them understanding what I'm trying to do and experimenting with subject matter and style, all while at the same time staying true to my purpose of connecting people to the healing power of nature. The second step is to create and deepen relationships with my audience. I knew that certainly through my work at MoMA. And by this, I mean, no matter how irresistible my art was to some people, I still found that it was basically, friends, family, a few coworkers buying works. And I didn't get discouraged about that. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? And I realized that people need to know a little bit about me and they need to really love the work I'm doing to purchase the work. There's a great TED talk by the author Simon Sinek from about 10 years ago. And the talk is called "People Don't Buy What You Do, They Buy Why You Do It." And in it, he studied how kind of top marketers do their marketing versus sort of the average person who does marketing, and found that sort of average marketing basically promotes what people do. Maybe they make computers. So they're like, oh, this is the computer, here are the specs. And instead he found a company like Apple instead reverses it and says, talks about why do they make computers. So I think we all know ads for Apple say, think differently. And it's all about innovation and revolution. And it's more about a feeling and that they just happen to make computers. So I really I feel very inspired by that. So I try as best I can. It's not easy, but I try to communicate, why I make the art I make. And that's where social media, blog, email, doing events, all those things I think really come into play. So once people understand why I do it, a little bit about who I am, and they enjoy the work I do, then it's not just another random work. They're like, oh, I get who this guy is and I get what he's making. The third step is almost in a sense an afterthought. I feel like if I do the first and second step, the third one practically comes, which is to actually sell the work, to invite people. So initially I was selling a lot of work on Etsy. Now it's almost exclusively through my website. And there are a lot of tips and tricks marketing wise that do help with this third step. And I'll go over some of the ones I use. But really, I would say kind of my advice for people that are looking to sell heavily online, which is what I do, is to really focus on steps 1 and 2, like making something that really connects with whoever your audience might be, and to really, really work on letting people kind of know who you are and why you're doing it and the purpose behind it. Social media, I use basically, for my work at least, Facebook and Instagram. I share pretty kind of standard images of my art, my studio, photos of me, landscapes by other artists. I'll jump down to one of the lower bullet points, and that's A/B testing ads. So in this example, what I would do is I would post a picture of one of my paintings, a little description of the painting, and then I would make it an ad. And there are various demographic attributes. So they'll say like who do you want to target the ad to? Do you want it to be like New York or the world or United States or regions, age, gender, interests, all these things. So I would initially start with like a broad audience that I think might be interested, not in buying one of my works, because again, they don't really know who I am. So instead I make the ad to encourage them to like follow me or check out my profile, something like that, to kind of like work people kind of gradually into my world, before kind of going for the ask for, like, say, buying a work or being more involved, like going to an event or something. So I will post an image of the artwork, little description, broad audience. And then let's say if I spend $30, I might get 30 follows. Then I post the exact same image, exact same text, do another ad, same amount of money, but I tweak one little demographic aspect. So maybe I target it, instead of everybody, I target it to say folks 55 and older. And if that yields a better result, if I spent $30 and now I have 40 followers, then I'm like, great. So now I'm going to focus on that same audience, 55 and older, tweak another demographic aspect, all while using the same image, same text. And by doing that, then you can kind of get more followers, per dollar, but also you get to like learn who your audience is. And it's not to say that your audience is exactly like this type of person with this who likes online shopping, but that it's in a sort of a general kind of sense. That's an audience. And I think that can be really insightful way of understanding, who you're talking to as well. Pricing, I figured if I can't sell a painting for $100, I couldn't sell it for 1,000. That's not entirely true, because I've sold paintings before at like, high prices, but for this project, for landscape painting, I wanted to start like, my goal wasn't to like maximize my dollar amount. My goal was to connect with people over nature using my art. So I wanted to start really low and then just work my prices up. Arguably, $100 or $200 is really low for the work I was doing. But in a sense, prices are so easy to change. You can change them in an instant. I think what's really difficult is to connect with folks, emotionally with your work. So that to me was the easy part. And then I can just raise those prices as my confidence and my experience goes up. I also do my pricing roughly based on the artwork size. So the bigger the work, the more I'll charge for it. And then one other factor I really like to consider is you can just add up all the expenses of making artwork and you've got yourself the retail price. So just like in any other company or the job you may have, you can just do your hourly rate multiplied by your hours worked and then add in all your other expenses. And that can be a really interesting perspective to understand, really how much energy and effort and material does go into the work you make. I've found that for me, discounts really work. You walk down Main Street, USA, you'll see sales in every single window. That's because they really, really work. Even in the art world, they're not advertising on the front window, but dealers are all the time giving, like, say, 20% off to repeat buyers. People absolutely love getting a deal. I kind of feel like it short circuits people's like minds or something. They love feeling like they're in the know. They're getting, they're saving money. It's just a really kind of cool feeling for them. And sales really only work if they're limited time. So you'll often hear that the sale's only for a weekend or for the week. That's what's called a call to action. It inspires people to like, okay, now's the time. Maybe I've been wanting to buy something forever, but with this sale, this is the moment for me to stop doing all the other things I'm doing and actually like, commit. I personally prefer to do a sale for 1 hour. So I'll let people know like an hour and a half ahead of time. I'm sorry, I'll let people know like a week or a week and a half ahead of time that I'm going to have this sale. And I usually pair it with an event. And then that I find is, very effective. I've had my retail price by 20%, so I can afford to discount by 20%. I've done sales for like older works, 50, 60, 70%. I find that's more effective, but unnecessary. I also find sales around 10 to 15% are not that effective. It's kind of like, so what? Around 20 to 25%, I think is kind of a sweet spot. I only discount my older paintings, not my new work. I find that people, yes, they absolutely continue to buy full price work. I didn't always discount, but then when I started to add select sales throughout the year, selling older works that I'm just kind of eager to get them out of the studio or the home, it can be a really great inspiration for folks to say, okay, now's the time. I'm going to go for that sale. I also find too, my higher end buyers are just as motivated by a discount as those that are more price sensitive too. I call my collectors, but nonetheless, there's a lot of customer service that goes into this. So I'm sure, like many of you, if not all of you, have had a customer service job at some point, and I certainly have, and I find those skills really come into play. Because again, it's all about relationship building, and often the relationship you form with your audience is just as valuable to them as the artwork that they may purchase or the event they may go to. And I just want to do a little shout out here that it's much easier to get a sale from a repeat collector than a sale from a new person. That's true in kind of all aspects of business. I've read that other artists have found that to be true for themselves, and I found that to be true for me as well. So I didn't really believe that people would sort of repeat purchase so much, but I've actually had some collectors that have bought up to 7 works over the last few years. And those are people, I think the reason why this is happening is they already love my work. The first 2 steps I was talking about, they love my work and they know who I am and what I'm all about. So then the sale, when you get those 2, I find that the sale just kind of comes from there. Like sometimes you need to have an event or do something to kind of inspire it, but people are pretty much on board there. And it's a lot harder to kind of reach new audiences and kind of orient them to you and what you're all about. So after a few years of using Etsy, again, I wanted to expand my audience, and I felt like having my own website was really the appropriate way to do it. And so I got a Squarespace website. I've had many artist websites in the past, and I absolutely love Squarespace. They have great e-commerce functionality. They have like a blog you can make. They have really great email integration. Very elegant, very intuitive. It's easy to use. You don't need coding. And my work at MoMA has really gotten me quite familiar with the importance of, as you call in marketing terms, the different channels. So you have blog, your website, email, and social media. And the more that you can get folks to kind of move between those 4 channels, the more engagement and the more sales that you're likely to get. And I've certainly seen that. So I was not super interested in making a blog. I don't have like a tremendous amount of confidence in my writing skill. But it kind of got to the point where I was like, oh, I know that they're effective. I really do. So I'm going to go for it. It doesn't need to be some amazing thing, but it totally works. Sometimes I do promotional things. Sometimes I share about like how I'm feeling or my latest work. Again, I'm not the world's greatest writer, far from it, but it's really effective in getting people to like see more of my works, increase sales. I ask folks on my social media to join my email. I ask people from my email to view my website. Just kind of getting that kind of flow of people through the different channels really helps them to like stay connected and engage with what I'm doing. Email has a much higher click-through rate compared to social media, where you'll just get a little fraction of your audience. And unlike social media, email is a direct connection between me and my audience. So, I use Facebook and Instagram heavily. Those are really not my followers. They're Mark Zuckerberg's followers. So I've seen my Instagram impressions go down dramatically recently just because, these companies ultimately change algorithms. They may make it harder for you to use. And that's completely up to their discretion. Email, however, is something I control. So I think it's really great. And I encourage everyone to have an email list and to work on growing it, throughout time, because that is a direct connection. No matter what happens to those social sites, they're always changing. There's always new ones coming up. You always have that email list, which I think is a great thing to have. I'll try to speak real quickly on 2 ways for email growth techniques. One is a artwork or print giveaway. I found that very successful. So if you look at the image in the bottom right, you'll see I'm doing a painting demonstration at the Fenimore Art Museum, selling some works you see on the right. And in the far back, there's a print on an easel on a table. And next to that, there's a sign saying, it's a print raffle, add your email for the print raffle. And so people would just, put their email on a card, throw it in a fishbowl. And then at the end of the event, I would pull out a lucky name, send them the artwork, and I would have a much larger email list from all of these email names. And all of these people are interested in enough to own one of my works. So I know that they're like kind of a warm audience. They would be receptive. The other strategy is if you go to websites, you'll often see that kind of annoying pop-up that asks you to join their email list. They're absolutely everywhere because they work. They are really effective. Squarespace has some options. More are like, just will blow up your whole screen, and some are a little more polite and sit in the corner. But that's an effective strategy as well. The last big thing I'll talk about is Instagram Live. When Instagram Live appeared, I had absolutely no interest in participating in Instagram Live. I did not care, about it. But I listened to the Art Marketing podcast, which I highly recommend. I've gotten a lot of tips and tricks from them. And in the Art Marketing podcast, they suggested that during the pandemic, especially, Instagram Live is a really effective, not just Instagram, but like Instagram Live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, that doing these sort of live events are a fantastic way of connecting with folks and selling artwork. So I thought, let me stay curious. I'll give it a try. And, no matter what happens, I can at least say I gave it a try. And maybe I'll sell a couple works. The most I ever sold was like 8 at an in-person event. So I got onto Instagram Live. You can see in the bottom corner, I recruited my wife, got a glass, had a drink, kind of like it's an art opening, a little tour of my home or studio, showed them the artwork, asked questions, asked them for questions, stuff like that. And I've done 4 of them now. The first one I sold 15 works, which completely blew me away. I was really amazed at just how effective this strategy is of using Instagram Live. And I'll show you kind of how it works. I think one of the reasons it works is it's using all the marketing tips and techniques I just talked to you about. I would start by promoting it heavily on social media. I make a blog post about it, promote the blog post on social media. I'd send an email about it. I do an artwork raffle during the Instagram Live. So ahead of it, I was asking people to join the raffle virtually. The day of the event, I would send an email 3 hours before the event to all my email subscribers. And I would say, hey, thanks so much for being an email subscriber. To show my appreciation, I want to let you in early on my my sale. So either I had works discounted or I brand new works that I had available until that time. So they could go onto my website, see works I just put up, and they could buy them before anybody else. This technique I found was very effective. I actually made most of my sales before the event even started. And then during the event, I could actually relax a little bit knowing I'd already made some sales. And then during the event, I'd talk to my attendees, ask them for questions, ask them how they're doing, getting that really nice connection, thanking them for their support. And then frequently at the end, I'd have an artwork raffle. And then this will be my last slide. So, as artists, we're constantly making, the products we sell, right? So, so many companies, they're just mass producing things and all you have to do is worry about marketing. So I was wondering, as all artists do, thinking about prints. So I explored, I tried lino cut printmaking. I wanted to stay curious about it. I was like, I don't know if I'd be interested, but let me give it a try. As it turned out, I was able to sell some of my lino cuts, but I wasn't a huge fan of the process. And I think it's so important to be true to yourself. And if you love doing it, great. But if not, what's the point, really? Another technique I tried was reproduction. So I uploaded a very high resolution image of one of my artworks to Fine Art America, which is a print on demand service where you can set the price, and then if anyone wants to buy it, they can purchase the work, in which case they will like print it and ship it, and they take care of, everything for you. So this seems very appealing to me. However, I haven't been that successful with it. I think maybe I need to post more images. I need to kind of tinker with my marketing. But just to sort of round out this conversation, I'll just say, I'm not going to be discouraged. I'm going to stay curious, and because I know that like no matter how good of an artist I am, sometimes it just requires like trying a different subject matter, maybe trying a little bit different of a marketing technique, and what seemed impossible all of a sudden, can turn into success. So anyway, I've talked more than enough. So I'm going to stop my share now. Maybe we can get some questions. And hi. So my coworker Arlette is here, and I think she'll be able to feed me a few questions as we go.
Yeah, we've been receiving some really wonderful questions in the chat. So first of all, thank you, everybody. And if you have, questions, thoughts, comments, suggestions, feel free to drop them in the chat. The first question I want to pose to you, Alex, this is from Juan Pablo, who said, you studied to be an artist, so you knew that you would be doing that full time. What are your thoughts for those who are transitioning from another career into a full-time artist? And then in parentheses, I'm talking about the fear of, if I'm good enough, is it going to take a long time for people to know my art or to like my art, which is very relatable. So
yeah, so I am a full-time MoMA employee and I love making art. And I've had so many different goals with my art over the years. A lot of it, like I've made paintings that are just for me. I've done projects where I kind of wanted to be more seen or feel clever or things like that. And recently I've been wanting to kind of connect to people like, more about nature. And being the age I'm at, I've been a little more interested in actually making some money off of that, so that it isn't just a giant, hole in terms of my finances. So let's see here. I'm going back to your question here because so my audience, I rigged the game, for this project to be manageable for me. So my audience, I'm painting quickly so I can make my paintings a little more affordable. So my paintings sell around $200 to $900, kind of in that range. And so I'm kind of doing a kind of a broad audience of people that love landscape painting. It's probably an easier audience than for a lot of folks, where maybe you have like you may have to charge more for certain works because you just spend a lot more time with them. I don't know. I hope I answered that question a little bit.
yeah, and Juan Pablo, if you have like a follow-up question, feel free to drop that in the chat. I also you spoke a little bit about audience. And so somebody at the very beginning asked, how do you measure like the ways in which people connect and how like successful that connection is?
So I think it's really great for each person to define that very clearly for yourself. I think it's very, very personal, and it's really great. Otherwise, if you're like me, then you want to be rich and famous and seen and clever and all these things. So it's that's way, at least for me, that's way too much. So whenever I start a project, I'm like really defining like what it means to be successful. So in my particular case, I decided it was about basically like each painting I'm making, I'm trying to get as many of my paintings into homes as possible. And in the process, a secondary thing is to make those sales, right? And to sort of gradually increase my prices as I go. I think artists have a really healthy skepticism in general about money. And I love that, but I also just think of it as just a form of energy that helps me like further my artistic practice. So I do pay attention to that a bit so that I can keep feeding it, right? Because there's a lot of demands on our time.
And kind of from like your analytics background, how does that factor into like the way you kind of measure connection?
Right. So yeah. So I guess for me, sorry, it's I think the number of sales, the amount I make in total is really good. That's what I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say there. And I'm also looking to expand my audience a bit. I mean, I've gotten some emails since I do work so hard on connecting with my audience. I've gotten emails from people that are like super touching and really nice when, they get to work of art of mine that they really love. But yeah, I guess I would say I'm always looking to expand my audience. So the more I feel like I'm getting new people, the more new buyers, the more sales. Those are my kind of personal metrics. And again, I just like really encourage people to like think about their own, personal practice and like how you want that to go, because it may be very different. I know it's been very different for me, in other circumstances.
That's really helpful. Like I always think from the perspective of if you're like an institution that has an Instagram profile, you get access to all these special analytics, but as an individual, you don't get that. And so like what other ways can you engage that? And I think you spoke really, really wonderfully to that. And like kind of related to that, another question we got is where and who is your audience? Like if you had to give kind of like a personality to them. And would you say that what is the intersection of the audiences, like your audience kind of broadly, and then the people who buy your art?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to break that down. Demographics, my audience is a little bit older. It skews a little more female. People are employed. I found that most people that buy my works, like it's very easy. I found in my audience to sell a work between like $200, $400, $500. I have kind of a different audience for 500 and above, and that's much smaller group of people. A lot, has initially come from friends, family, coworker. That's been really helpful. And then I found that a really important link has been friends of friends, people that see my work in someone's home. And I'm so appreciative of people who say, oh yeah, like this is like so-and-so. And then that little connection has been so helpful. I've gotten plenty of strangers. So through the Instagram lives I've done through Instagram, through Etsy, I've had kind of strangers kind of come into my orbit that way. And that's really wonderful. And then I try to work hard on keeping them in the loop. So like with Etsy, for instance, it's kind of hard to message people there. So I try to, encourage people as best I can. It's a little hard to do on Etsy, but to like follow me on Instagram, follow my email, especially things like that.
And somebody also, Katie asked, what role do competitions play into marketing your art, whether that's a juried show or like a show with an award component? Does that factor in at all into your marketing? And if so, how?
Yeah, I've done a couple of those, and I did not win the awards either time. I would have liked to have, but I didn't. But in a sense, it doesn't really matter to me, at least, because to me, again, my goal is to connect people to nature with my art. And when I have people coming to see my work, like, and that's happening, then that's really my goal. And this, I'd also like to mention too that this is a very kind of like online centric presentation, because being someone with a full-time job, I realized I have marketed my work in person for events before. And I found that like selling work online is a really relatively efficient way of marketing versus in person. And of course, with the pandemic, I mean, my gosh, like so many people buy artwork online. It's much easier to get people like on their phone on their sofa than have them like come to an event in person. Ultimately, I think connecting with people in real life, I think is probably the best way. Like that's the most human way to connect with people. But in terms of efficiency, I think online is a really fantastic way to do it. And so I've been focusing on that a lot because like, I'm sure like all of you, I have very limited time, and you want to spend more of it making art and enjoying yourself than just doing endless marketing or preparing for like those outside events. I don't know about for you, but for me, it takes a lot of time to like do those setups and prepare for those types of events in person.
And that actually leads me right to another question that we received about, and you spoke to this really well earlier as well, like did you see any major change in how you marketed your art before and after the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's very funny because I was, because of that, shortage of time I had, I was like, I'm going to be an online artist. I'm like super focused on that. I'm not going to like get sucked into like doing tons of things in person. And then as time evolved, by like at the beginning of 2020, my New Year's resolution was like, this is the year I'm going to be selling my art in person, and I'm going to make that extra effort and go out into person to sell my art, which is very funny or ironic considering what happened next, where all of a sudden it turned out I was perfectly positioned to be selling my art from my computer. And I kept thinking about, there's like online viewing rooms. There's a lot of, I think a lot of artists were really struggling with how to connect to people digitally. I participated in a bunch of events, as maybe many of you did, digitally, where it was basically a website. And I found it didn't do anything, because it's really hard to kind of do that second step I was talking about, to really connect with people when they just see one image on a website. And that's, I think, where the Instagram lives I found were really super helpful. And I'll definitely keep doing that. And I kind of think that this pandemic has really pushed us digitally, like into the future much more than we would be. So I think a lot of these things are probably, here to stay.
Yeah, I think about that too, just in terms of even the way like we interact with our wonderful learners. It started out digitally, but now there's a lot of kind of more innovation, right, that we do with programming. We have a bit of a technical question, I think. I don't know, I'm not super familiar with like
Sure.
the Instagram platform, but somebody asked, how do you make an Instagram ad? Because I think you spoke to that earlier.
Yeah, I think there is something, now I'm pulling up my phone to like, look, I think when you make a post, it says something like, would you like to promote the post? Let's see here. It says on the bottom right corner of an image, it says boost post. Now that may be only if you have a business account. So, and that's what I have. It's very easy. You can switch your account to a business account. So you get to keep all your followers, all that kind of stuff. You can always switch it back if you like. It really doesn't make any difference, but it offers those options. And you may need, this was so long ago I did it, you may need a Facebook page to have that started. But once you make that switch, you'll see all the prompts, on how to do that.
Would you recommend like switching it or creating like a separate one? So like having kind of your personal Instagram, but then creating a new business Instagram?
You can have multiple ones, whatever works for you. I have periodically explored, paid marketing on social media. From my own experience and from what I've read, I'm sort of lukewarm on it. I like to keep experimenting with it. I try it with certain things. I'm not a master of it at this point, that's for sure. And I'm not sure it's really not the be all end all way to, I think, expand an audience. I think getting out into person, doing types of events, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I wouldn't rely too heavily on it, but I would definitely explore it, especially in terms of trying to like get new people to at least follow you.
We also received a few questions kind of related to relationships with like galleries and different art spaces. Sophie asked if you have any tips on building a relationship with a gallery or a formal art space.
Yeah, so I've never been like formally represented by a gallery before, but I have shown my work in the past at community galleries. And I think that's where like friends of mine that have been artists have been really helpful. And being able to go to like their events and then meet the curators there and having conversations with them and letting them know like who I am. And if you're like me, I'm just not going out nearly as much as I used to, because of the pandemic. And I actually do feel like I'm making this pitch for online. I really do feel like selling online is like, boy, have I gotten like a lot more eyeballs this way. And it's really satisfying, I think, to be able to control in many ways, like how people see you versus in the in-person situation where maybe it happens once every 6 months or something like that. It's pretty limited. You don't have your own email list. The gallery, kind of like Etsy, the gallery owns their email list. So I don't quite have the same connection with my collectors, which is important to me. So that's been my experience, at least.
I remember a while ago, when I worked at the Met, I hung out a lot with the art handlers who also have kind of straddled this practice of like working full time in a museum, but also having their own individual art practice. And I remember one of the things that that people actually reiterated to me quite a lot is like the best thing that you can kind of do, or one of the really good things that you can do to kind of build your presence is have somebody write about your art, whether that's like on a blog post or on Instagram or on Hyperallergic. Is that anything that like you've considered or have like experience with?
Yeah, I've had a few articles written about me. It's definitely not. Did I notice a change? I didn't notice like a definite uptick. I noticed the article and I felt very special. Someone wrote something about me. So yeah, it wasn't like the be all end all for marketing for me, but I do think you're absolutely right. Like it is, we're living in an attention economy. We're like looking to get attention. It's so fractured out there. So I think it's really great to have cross promotional, like I was talking about, you cross promote yourself with your blog to your email and your email to your blog and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really great to collaborate with our other artists, in this way, marketing wise. I've also collaborated with other artists in my art making, which has been really helpful for my art marketing. And it's been really helpful when I've been really hard on myself as an artist and I need someone else to collaborate with and just frankly lighten up a little bit. And that's been really effective as well. Same with like group shows. Group shows are great that way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it too. We received this question from Karen that I think is really interesting, and it kind of like speaks to some of the ideas that we were running through as we were planning this event. Karen asked, do you get any flack from friends and family when you're marketing to them, and how do you handle that? Do you provide automatic discounts for friends and family?
Yeah, so gosh, it's so important to acknowledge that when you're marketing yourself, or I'll speak out from my end, I feel very vulnerable. You are putting yourself out there. And people may not, it's just like when you're a kid and you're hosting a birthday party, you're like, is anyone going to come up? Is anyone going to like this? And that's why I spent so much time kind of talking in the beginning of this talk about, working really hard on making sure that your work does connect with an audience. So then that way it is in a sense appealing. Like people are like, oh, that like I do like what he's doing. And then there is that connection. And I would also say that like, there are certain circumstances where I am like, it's ideal to kind of post every day, at least, do those kinds of things. But that people just don't see all this stuff. Like you think people see everything you do and it's really just a fraction of it. So I just try to always remind myself of that too, that, a lot of people don't read the email. A lot of people missed your post. It's it's okay. It's like, you got to put yourself out there. If you're interested in kind of connecting with a larger audience. I mean, I've done works of art, like I said, just for myself. And if that's the case, then like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to like market to so many people. And no, I haven't gotten any flack.
I would imagine you wouldn't. I do love the question of like, do they get an automatic discount?
Oh, but yeah, that's an interesting point too, is friends and family discount. I started my prices really low. So I was basically like, that's the discount for everyone. And I've really made my discounts much more about like a sale, like I'm having this event and this is the sale. I have done it for, another one that's really effective is I've done where I've kind of sold multiple works at the same time. I will say, if you're getting 3 or 2 or something like that, I'll add like an additional discount there. I've probably done a couple discounts for friends and family, but not too much because I kind of started so low.
We have a question that that I'm going to take like a little step further because I'm interested, but Juan Pablo asked, how much time do you spend on marketing your art per day? Or do you dedicate like a day per week? And I kind of taking that a little bit further in terms of your broader artistic practice, how much of it do you think is actually focused on marketing as opposed to creating? Like, how do you negotiate that balance?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, I probably spend more time marketing than painting. I really wish it was the opposite, but I think that's kind of effective. I've been surprised by how difficult it is to bounce between the two. So I feel like at this point, marketing and making my art should feel more interwoven. Like it should be easier for me to go between the two. But I feel like it's two completely different like kind of lobes of my brain. Or so I tend to focus a bit more on making my art in like large chunks and then marketing in large chunks. Again, I try to market. It's good to like post something, every day. It's good to do like a blog post every few weeks. Consistent marketing, I think being consistent is extremely important. But I think it's just important to acknowledge that it's in a sense kind of like two different types of work that one does. And it doesn't necessarily just sort of flow, but if you're like, okay, it's time, I kind of get into a rhythm of like, it's time to send an email or it's time to do something like that. And then, try to find a way to do it that's a little inspiring. And, and just to know that like people, if you take the time for people to connect with your work, they will enjoy it. They would like to see more of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful point. And kind of on that same thread, how do you balance making work that sells and connects with people? So, hitting that kind of bottom line while still creating work that is true to yourself. So how do you make art that is representative of you and not just art to make profit?
Yeah, and that's I think where that kind of goal comes into play. So, it's for me, it's about helping people kind of connect to the healing power of nature. So that's the goal. If I can get art into their home, then that's it for me. That's my goal. It's not, and that's kind of the connection I'm looking for. That's the feeling. That's the purpose versus me trying to. And so then it's just a matter of like, well, how can I kind of best do that? So, there's been so many other times where maybe I want to elicit different emotions, in other projects I've done. So it's really about finding a way of doing that. So like, for instance, I think sometimes artists see it as oppositional. I don't personally see it that way. So like I once heard a story about Andy Warhol did a painting of a Coke bottle. And then he did two different versions. One had a lot of drips on it and one was super clean, kind of like the way we kind of think of Andy Warhol artwork. And he asked a friend who I would presume he kind of trusted to be representative of his audience and said, which one do you find more interesting? And the friend said, oh, I like the cleaner one. That's kind of different and unusual. And, that was like a guiding thing for him. He got that feedback. Or stand-up comedians do the same thing. Their integrity isn't based on a specific joke they made up, working. Instead, they'll go out and they'll see if they get that laugh because the power comes from that emotional connection. Not from like, I must make a joke about X, Y, or Z, right? Like they might have a general area that they're working with. So that's at least my perspective of it, that the two are, in my mind, parallel and not oppositional.
Yeah, I'm so glad you had like a concrete example and also spoke to the fact that it doesn't have to be opposing. It can actually be complementary. And I think so much of what you said also applies to people who aren't necessarily just visual artists, but maybe like writers or I don't know, educators, creatives in like the broadest sense of the word. I'm just looking at the clock now and we have about 2 minutes left before we wrap up. I don't know if there's any kind of closing comments you want to say. We do have one or two more questions if you want to go for it.
There's been a couple more, yeah.
Okay. So you spoke a little bit about commissions, which I think is like it's just a very interesting part of kind of having an artistic practice. And this, I'm not an artist, but I'm a tattooed person. And so I often like commission work from artists to put on my body. and what tips do you have for kind of setting and maintaining these healthy client-artist boundaries while working on commissioned projects?
Yeah, so I think commissions can be intimidating because I think we all intuitively know that there's so much vagueness, right? Like your idea of what it's going to be versus what your client's idea of what it's going to be versus what it's actually going to be. Like those can be three separate things. So when I've done commissions, I've tried to remove all the vagueness. I try to over communicate. I try to make it incredibly clear on my website and my emails that this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. This is the exact timing in which I can do it. This is how much it's going to cost. Like, I like to, I think just customer service comes into play a lot there too. Just like checking in with people, like, here's the finished work. Is there anything like you'd like me to adjust, any last minute kind of thing? You know, I just try to be really, really clear and have a very tight defined kind of parameters for how I do commissions. Because in that way, you're not constantly questioning yourself too, like, oh, should I be doing this or that? Or, you know, if you, the more you kind of figure out what your commission business is in the beginning, I think the better. And then people, then the clients feel taken care of, and they feel like this is a really exciting kind of experience for them to be able to do it too. And it's low stress, you know, or relatively for me.
I'm just so moved by how much of your work is really about that human connection and making sure that people feel cared for, whether that's through inspiring those connections to nature or literally caring for them through the commission process. It's 2:30 now, and so I will go back into the shadows and let you close out the event, but this is wonderful. Thank you everybody for submitting your questions.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Arlette. And thanks for spending an hour with us and all your thoughtful questions. In the meantime, we would love to keep the conversation going. So please continue sharing with us by posting in the discussion forums. Take care.